I'd like to open up the meeting for a workshop on the Downtown Service Center. And given that we're a few minutes behind, I'll just open it up right straight to Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, County Manager. First, I'd just like to say welcome to Metro Square. We were just talking about if any of you had been in this space, and it is a very nice space that was finished about 2018, but Metro Square is no longer just the home of finance or HR now here in this space, or the county attorney's office, or corrections on the first floor. It's also now the home to the Ramsey County Downtown Service Center, and that's what we're here to talk about today. I'm here not only as the DCM for the Information and Public Records Service Team and a member of the executive team, but also as co-executive sponsor of Residents First, along with my colleague, Joanna Berg. So the Service Center or integrated services model exists not just to help our residents and others navigate our current systems, but in fact it exists to transform service delivery within the system to make them more fundamentally easier to navigate, as well as more effective and more efficient, allowing us to serve our residents with excellence. I say that because I think that that cannot be overstated, and you're going to hear it again in the presentation once we get started with that. On the agenda today, we have Melinda Donaway as our Interim Director of Enterprise Services. She'll start us off by giving an update on integrated services. Then Ling Becker, who is the Director of Workforce Solutions, will talk about our new service center's leadership structure. And Jean Kruger, who is the Director of Property Management, will talk about the collaborative facilities planning process that went into the design and build out of our new Downtown Service Center, which we're calling the Downtown Service Center 2.0, right? Okay. And by the way, the build out started in July, and we are scheduled to move in starting on October 31st. So do the math. Big, huge kudos to the entire team for making this happen and making it happen quickly. Now my hope, everybody, is that we can resume a more sustainable pace going forward. The last part of the presentation, Mal Bang, who is our Interim Manager of Enterprise Services, will share some data that has been collected to date on the Downtown Service Center usage. And after that, we'll do the walking tour of the new Downtown Service Center 2.0. The three things that we hope you will take away from the workshop and the tour today are, number one, that the Downtown Service Center will continue to provide integrated services that currently includes navigator services, workforce solutions, financial assistance services, and social services. And we couldn't do any of that without our strong partnership with property management. We heard from property management last week at the workshop on the broader picture of Residents First facilities, but I just want to call out what a true partnership we have with them within the integrated services that we provide for our residents in all of our service centers. They've taken a great deal of time to learn and understand service delivery and be a true partner in the design and function of our facilities. Excuse me. And just so you know, today we're not going to be talking in detail about this, but we've already begun to think about what other services will be provided in the service centers in the future, and that includes the downtown service center, but all of our service centers. We also want you to take away that intentional collaboration between the areas that I mentioned just a minute ago, as well as resident feedback, informed space design, new ways of coordinating services across departments, and safety considerations. And lastly, we'd like for you to take away from this today that we will be carrying on with the continuous improvement process and assessing new learnings, especially now that the final phase of return to office is complete, which allows for more in-person resident services. As a result, we'll also continue to be flexible and nimble. So now I'm going to turn it over to Melinda, who will start the presentation.
Thank you, Karen. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, County Managers, partners, and guests, I'm really excited to be here to talk about our objectives, take a review of our history, and then talk about the ways that we're going to be expanding service delivery in the service center. So I start every presentation about enterprise services and the work that's happening in service centers and navigators with this slide to really emphasize that our role is to dramatically transform, and I read it just like this, dramatically transform how Ramsey County delivers services by engaging residents and employees to provide the best possible resident experience and outcomes. This is why I get excited about what I do every day, why I really signed on to this vision, and that is that our charge is to transform service delivery to take the complexity of our system off of the residents and onto us. We did not, this whole team did not sign up to do this work to help navigate residents to areas within the county as they are. We truly signed up for this vision and this work to transform service delivery. And so it's really move that needle that we see right now with disparate outcomes for residents. And so we stopped because we know that this work is not easy, but it is that important to pause and to flesh that out. So taking a pause and looking back on all the work that we've done over the years, and I know that Jean Kruger was here last week to really walk us through the facilities work that's going on. And so, but it's important to take a look back at all the accomplishments and the leaps and bounds that we've done over the years. And as you all know, the facilities first planning work began prior to 2019 under the Residents First program. And then as part of the COVID response, 5 service centers were launched in August 2020 with navigators that were trained in 4 critical areas: social services, financial assistance services, workforce solutions, and property solutions. We then transitioned to the Information and Public Records Service Team in 2021 and established permanent staffing and department status, and then began the work of really looking at how we establish processes in partnership with county services throughout the county. We also grew our community partner site location in 2021, recognizing that we need to go where residents are, and a large part of 2021 was growing that important part of our work on setting up community partner sites throughout the county. And then, as you all know, in 2022, we moved our downtown service center from the East Building location over to Metro Square to prepare for the federal trial. And then through resident survey feedback, the decision was made that we should stay here in Metro Square, and we're excited to keep moving with the facilities planning work in partnership with property management and others. So I want to talk about integrated services that we have currently within Metro Square and what we're looking forward, some expanded opportunities that we're looking forward to seeing in the new space in Metro Square. We use an embedded staffing model that currently consists of enterprise services, so the customer support assistants and navigators throughout, and then financial workers are also embedded, and along with them, workforce solutions with employment guidance counselors and social services having drop-in times and visitation appointments happening within the service center. You'll see that staffing will increase for each service area with up to about 5 navigators. There'll be about 11 financial workers on site and 50 employment guidance counseling staff available for career lab services and virtual appointments and client appointments as well. We're really excited about the integrated services offerings of having a drop-in space available for staff across the county, to come and meet with residents in between their appointments in the service center, but also in between their appointments with residents in the community. We anticipate that this will benefit social services, corrections, public health, and other services that currently see residents in person. And there's
Before you jump, I just have a quick question. On the staffing at the service centers, like for instance, the additional FAS staff, are they actually doing intake? Are they just advising? You know, I'm thinking about how does that compare as we're doing really good externally and bringing more people in with the backlog of FAS? Are they actually working on cases?
They actually are working on cases. It's majority of their intake staff will be the ones housed in the new space.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And there's so many more opportunities to transform our current operations, and we're really ready to enhance the current service offering. So simply by being in the same physical space from different service teams in different parts of the county, we'll be able to better improve our coordination and services to residents. Applying different scopes of practices and really using that time to consult professionally will benefit services to residents. We're working with the program manager right now to review our workflows and our processes to look at how residents come into the service center and how we provide customer service to them. So this takes, and with technology options at the table. So this will take into account different queuing systems and how to enhance what we're currently doing. We'll be able to better evaluate resident outcomes and looking at that whole process to better transform how we're measuring and tracking our residents right now to better and more meaningful performance measures and metrics. And we're really excited about thinking about how to better connect the work that we're doing with residents to more meaningful outcomes. So how do we better connect residents to subject matter experts throughout the county? And this is the area that we're most excited about and we're a huge opportunity to pursue. We know that residents are asking for this, and so are staff. Connecting residents to staff throughout the county with technology, whether residents are at home, calling on their phone, in a remote location, to staff that are also maybe on site, maybe in a remote location, or in a different county building altogether. And this is the next part of what we need to really explore, dare I say, simply and easily using technology to connect residents to subject matter experts. We also know that language, services, and solutions are going to be a critical part of that conversation. So this is all happening as staff are returning to a new way of working, and we're all adjusting to what this hybrid model looks like and the return to office impact. And so we know that having a drop-in space will be greater opportunities for staff to better collaborate on site, but also more opportunities for staff to come and go in between their meetings with residents in the community to use the space to better affect their work. We'll turn it over to Ling to talk about our leadership structure.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. So one of the things I think that we learned during the pandemic, and this happened several times over in the East Building, is realizing that we were starting to have issues that needed decision-making, and it involved multiple service teams with the Service Center in the East Building, with Workforce Solutions in the East Building, as well as the Health and Wellness team members and departments. We started to see that there was opportunities to collaborate more, but the actual structures for which we were having those conversations and to be able to make decisions wasn't necessarily in place. And so in late 2020, we formed what was the East Building leadership team of the directors of that building in order to help facilitate some decision-making in the building. This became a really positive model, particularly around safety. We felt that the safety committee within the building now had a place by which they could push up issues, and we were able to create more paths of action to give them more clear lines of decision-making and feedback. And so as a part of this work now, I think why the slide's here is we wanted to demonstrate that we were taking those learnings from the East Building and some of the things that happened during the pandemic and embedding them in the way we do work going forward. And so before Jean talks about some of the things that we are doing within the facilities planning, we wanted to demonstrate that we created an additional collaborative table and structure within the service centers that includes now the directors of enterprise services, social services, financial assistance, and libraries, and myself. And that they'll probably be rotating as different departments maybe take a bigger role in the service center, but certainly it's a rotating leadership too, which is what the model we had in the East Building as well. So currently I'm the chair of that, and at some point maybe some other director will be. But the whole goal is to kind of have this shared leadership model, but a place for decisions to get made and for these conversations to be had that really impact across service teams, across departments, and that didn't exist until we started doing some of our work in this more integrated fashion. And another benefit of this is last week we were able to launch then a new safety committee for the service centers. And that is now another path of action for those folks, for the union membership of Local 151 and Local 8 to feel there's a path for them to bring issues or concerns, and that there is a set of decision makers willing to own sort of the next steps and the follow-up and the feedback that's required for their concerns. And so just wanted to demonstrate that we've been learning on how we as an organization need to continue to pivot in order to be responsive to this integrated service model. Some of this doesn't quite fit naturally into our department or service team lines, but we're trying to all take some responsibility of the shared decision making. And it's been really collaborative. Like I will say, thanks to the support of the 3 DCMs in here, I think we feel as directors like there's a real opportunity to be able to make decisions and be able to hash out things at a director level, and then all bought in on whatever direction we're starting to take. So, and then that gives staff, I think, and those safety committees very clear direction rather than trying to figure out, well, what does this group think and what does this group think? There's just kind of one place to have those conversations. So thank you. And I'll turn it over to Jean.
Thank you, Lynn. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, here we are again, facilities time for 2 weeks. I'm feeling pretty good about that. I think, anyway. So today specifically, as you've heard, in our thinking about this Metro Square Service Center 2.0, we really did engage with staff from the groups that have been involved in the service center to date. You've heard it, you'll keep hearing it, right? Enterprise Services, FAS, Workforce, and to a lesser degree, in this case, social services and even child support, but we're trying to pull them in as well as we look to, as Melinda said, expand the service offerings. So we really wanted to know not just yesterday, today, but trying to inch forward to tomorrow in what this facility needs to be to allow more resident services. So we had the learnings from the first 1.0 Metro Square Service Center, but we also had the learnings from the other suburban service centers. We even had lessons learned from those original walk-up centers. And along the way, maybe they were a lot of bad lessons learned, but lessons learned from the East Building. And prior to the decisions to move the service center to Metro Square, we had been looking at how in the short term we could have improved the East Building while we were there, while again, the work you've heard from Residents First Facilities, thinking ahead and where do we really want to be. So looking at it from all those angles, what could we do here as we looked at implementing the 2.0? Again, resident feedback has entered into that from the surveys that have been done along the way, both directly and over the years and more recently through the service centers and through the work of Melinda and her team. The advisory group for Residents First Facilities, again, was instrumental in shaping the vision and helping us incorporate to the degree we could those visions into this center that we're going to open here. The key takeaways that we had, or goals for this space, obviously from the resident perspective, was to again provide a space which could allow staff and residents to be more interactional, not so much that transactional, that, come to a counter, be done. We kind of don't care about you, next, who's up, right? Spaces that they could feel like their needs were really being heard and addressed. interactionally. Really, that resident experience focused on welcoming and accessible. Also, from a staff perspective, Deputy County Manager Karen Francois mentioned it. We wanted the staff to have effective and efficient space, both while they're meeting with the resident, but then providing some separate drop-in space. Maybe they want to, work between resident interactions, have access to the multifunction devices, copy, fax, scan, but try to have everything they need for their time here to allow them to be as effective and efficient as they could be. Also, as you've heard, with a real eye on safety. How do we have this welcoming environment for residents and staff, but also assure people of the safety of the environment and the interactions that are occurring. Also, as you've heard, we did this post-trial. We had a real need for speed here to come up with something that could be implemented quickly but effectively and provide a better space for the interactions, but also to allow us to expand the services and the number of residents that can be seen in any given day. So next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a bit about
Jim.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Jean, you mentioned, and I just want to maybe tease this out a little bit, might have been just choice of words, but you mentioned like 2 or 3 groups. I don't recall who they were. And you said, we're trying to pull them in as we inch along. Try to get a sense of the decision-making about who's included and how that happens. Is this, they raise their hand and say we're in, or, because that kind of popped at me, like, how are we deciding who's in and who has the influence on saying yes or no about that?
Very good question, Commissioner McDonough, Mr. Chair. To that point, if you remember from the Residents First Facilities work that I talked about last week, we have had a wider variety of departments and services at the table for those discussions, and we've tried to always include them and where they see or we see the service center moving, and obviously with the ties to enterprise services, and sometimes people reach out to them, sometimes through us, but really trying to look at what are all of those services that we believe are, again, the core to offer to residents in one location, and what are those extended services that are going to be beneficial for them to be able to receive in the same facility, and trying to pull all of that together as we move forward. It's resources and it's time.
And I'll just add a little bit more, though. I mean, we're living in the middle of about 3 different things here, and I would ask this to be a takeaway maybe as we go. In the short term, what you'll see are the highest volume areas most in need of coming together first. I mean, when you look at the list here, like these, financial assistance and work, there's a reason why the starting point started where they did. Long term, it's not an opt-in thing that we're asking here. We're going to continue to build out a model in which the navigator and customer service assistant, thank you. I got the A wrong. I knew there was an A and I got it wrong. But that are placed at the center of the resident interaction, which means they need access to behind that. As a part of, you'll see some stuff here about resident relationship management and other pieces as we go. Who has tools and access to get to see the resident relationship management software will matter a great deal. If you give it to everybody, they're not going to want to partner. If you bring it through a particular area of the organization and say, this is the only portal on in, you incentivize the coming together. And so there's multiple steps here as we're moving. I like to think of it, the last thing I would just say, before this process started on that timeline, you had a resident and you had boxes to represent all the different areas of service in the county, and they'd all have an arrow to them. We've now moved to where it's a resident with an arrow to the N, the navigator box, with some arrows and they go beyond that as well. It still is like a lot of different arrows. The goal is to put the resident and the N in a box in the middle together, and all the other services will sit around that, but the N is what then pulls it all together. And that's going to be a big part of the next 2 years beyond where we're at point in time. Does that help give an arc at least to it?
Yeah, I think it's important to have some confidence that, last week you talked about the potential for the growth, right? And the need for the space was much more dramatically large than what these are. That helps in that planning. But really to have that sense of understanding about what's next as we're building this, right? Because the only way this truly is effective is if you get to that final spot that you talked about, right? Because even if there's still a couple of loose hanging things for that resident, they can come and do 3 of their things, but they still got to go off here and do 2 more. We're just having a lot of work to not quite get there.
I appreciate that, and truly it is the challenge in how to integrate and how rapidly to integrate and have the staff and have the knowledge to be that one door, right? So it all has to happen simultaneously. So,
can I ask one more question, please? Thank you. And I wasn't sure where to ask this, because you talked about the QEing and how this, yesterday at the District 10 meeting, we actually had a presentation from Dakota County. They went to all appointments for their service centers, which was really a big change. And they got pushback from staff. They actually got some pushback. Some people like to just say, oh, I'm going now and I want to be able to go. And they accommodate that. But the data they showed was pretty amazing, from an average wait of 30 minutes to almost 2 hours to 11 minutes or under for everybody. They've got their staff being able to accomplish what they need in about a 15-minute window, where it might have taken 20 to 30-minute window before. And when they come in, because when they make the appointment, whatever it's for, they kind of get this FAQ about what they might need to bring with them, or information that they'll need to have handy for their first appointment, which makes everything go smoother. And I don't know if we've been thinking about that, if we've looked at what they're doing as we're doing this to actually, build in a lot more efficiencies and make it a lot easier to use too.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, we are working very closely with IS. And IS, I don't know if you recall from the last board workshop we did with IS. We work with IS, and we are encouraging everyone in the county to work with IS from the point of saying to them what it is we're trying to achieve and having them work with us to figure out what the solution is. Instead of going to them and saying, we want this particular, and I think we saw some of that recently with a request for some technology for a couple of the commissioners here, that we go to them and we say, this is exactly what we need to do, as opposed to going to them with a solution in hand. So we're working very closely with them, and we expect that we will have a customer relationship management tool soon, a queuing tool, and if our team needs to go to Dakota County to visit, they will do that along with IS, so that they will be a big part of the solution.
Yeah, thank you.
Well aware of the Dakota work, and the last piece I would add, I do think because we deal with more people living right at the margin of risk, we have to think a little differently. I'm not saying you get that. I think the vision, from a tangible perspective, which helps for me, it's like, it's either going to be phone call or internet in, right? What's it going to look like at that moment, whether schedule or in the moment, what can we do? Or it's walk-in or set appointment. And there is no doubt that the more we're able to get to a place where we establish a time where you can come in, the more we can have wrapped around and have 8 people ready to go at that time. We can run you through a series of different connections. There's value in it. We'll never close off the emergency services end. And I think Dakota gets to do that a little lighter than we probably would.
They do have some backup, right?
Okay.
They keep a couple staff available for walk-ups. They try not to ever turn anybody away, even if they don't have an appointment. And I think they actually have maybe some windows throughout the week where walk-ups are kind of more prepared for. So there is some backup built into that and some flexibility, but they really are trying to drive the efficiencies through kind of the appointment piece of this as the main way to interact.
Krista?
Yeah, one of the things, Melinda, you mentioned about language, that I want us to go a little bit deeper or think about how I know we have hired interpreters that are working really long hours, and they don't have the benefit of being county employees or have additional benefits. And also, we have a number of workers. We've hired a lot of people who might speak second languages, but it's an extra tax on people to have to translate in their minds between multiple languages. And I'm wondering, as part of this plan, if we're thinking about incentivizing our own employees or hiring those interpreters to be employees of Ramsey County. Because I think about like how we can encourage people who might speak two languages to use it in the workplace. Right now, we kind of just, hey, so-and-so speaks Hmong, let's go get them, and it might not be their job, and they're pulled away from their desk. But if we know someone who might be qualified, willing to do it, that we offer an incentive and pay them for those services, if we're thinking about that in this model at all.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Montes-Castillo, I was looking at him because he's smiling because we talked about this last week a little bit as well. Yes, I mean, figuring out how to appropriately identify language as a skill within job classes is something that we need to be doing. Interpretive on-site services is another thing that we are working to do. We're now actually working, because there's been a couple of phone calls into Commissioner Ortega's office where we've had challenges on interpretation. So how do we have those services ready in the moment? And so we're doing some pieces of that. But it absolutely is on the radar. I think you're going to continue to see, I keep talking about the next 2-year budget because we're almost into that thinking phase. I don't mean to be doing it too much, but it's kind of where we are. It's foundational build-outs of things that we're doing where we see ourselves not yet. There's a gap to where we want to be and where we are. That's what a lot of this focus is going to be, and this would be an area I would identify as that. It's already on the list.
Great mind.
Because,
well, I'm wondering how we can deal with, and I don't know if it's with appointments or how we can do it, or if there's some way that you can get an appointment to get a call back. The most complaints that I get are from people that are frustrated because their work is not calling them back. And so is there some sort of a system that we could set up so that, okay, you get a voicemail when you can just automatically do that. Okay, she's not available right now. Leave your name and number, or we'll call you back, or some sort of triage, because I don't think it's isolated. I think it's pretty pervasive. And so we need to really deal with that because these are people that are in crisis.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Reinhardt, right now we expect everyone to be customer service relation reps, and you get a lot of feedback on how that goes, right, in the moment. Moving toward a model where the navigator sits at the center with a resident. And this is not like a let's do this in 10 years thing. This is a how do we think about this on a very couple of year cycle. But it would be we're not relying upon every worker to be making those calls, because I would posit to you that I do not think you can enforce the consistency and level of approach you want if you're doing it across that many different individuals. And we've never, my words, we have not highlighted the resident customer service aspect of the job well enough relative to the other criteria. And that's what you hear with the team here today is it's a skill unto itself that needs to be built out now so that there's an answer specifically to how quickly you get called back and what it looks like.
Well, so if that navigator needs to check on something specifically.
Take on the complexity of the situation.
Okay.
Yes. And we're not resourced for that yet, quite frankly, and they would be the first to tell me, and they're right, but that's the part that we have to do.
Well, by the time they get to the commissioner, they're freaking out.
Yeah.
Nicole?
Yeah, I'll build on that in two parts. One, because the role in some of these jobs, especially financial assistance, which is the one I'm most familiar with, really isn't what a lot of people think it might be going in. You think you're going to be helping people directly, and a lot of times you're wrestling with all the paperwork and here's all the things you need to do because with all these federal compliance reviews that are going to happen, and it's a different skill set. We all did that personality profile and skill set thing, right? We all had our different colors, and you're asking someone to find that person who is like supremely detail oriented to be successful on entering everything correctly in the system and getting all that, but also someone who's great with working with people. That's not a combination. I think Tony was the only one that the only one on our board who could do it, who had those two skill sets strong, right? But I want to make sure as we tease that apart, that we are recognizing the value in both of those positions. I don't know how it's currently set up, but I think sometimes you might have, okay, well, you're the intake worker, so you're going to deal with people, and then we've got the financial workers in the back dealing with the processes, and if one is compensated more, when really they're complementary skill sets, and whether you are forward-facing or back-end facing, they're different skill sets. They should really be different positions and compensated equitably for both of those skill sets that you're bringing in. And it's not that one is better than the other. We need both to be successful, and pulling apart those needs into the positions, I think, would really set us up for success as we move towards this model.
All right, thank you. So after we chat here, obviously, there will be the tour of the service center, but it'll be challenging as we walk around to talk much or share much that everyone would be able to hear. So I want to kind of go through a bit about the floor plan here as an aid to the tour that we'll do. So as you no doubt know, the space that we're talking about is on the second floor. If you came through the Skyway, you walk right past the front door. The front door to the space, which is the previous HR suite on second floor, the front door will be literally midway between the Skyway entry and the beautiful new staircase. If you didn't see or try out our new staircase, please do so.
No, seriously, this is like a huge deal. Y'all better like it.
It's worth a call out. It's worth a trip up and down.
The old sign saying, this escalator closed that lasted like 5 years is finally gone.
Don't get distracted up staircase.
So that's where the entry is. On the drawing here, you see a little bit of the purple shaded at the top. That's actually part of the current service center that we'll be moving out of. And lower from that, this is the service center 2.0. It is the southwest corner of the building. And when you enter into the area that is mostly here.
Which part is that?
I need a
laser pointer.
Place up a point and see that.
Is that the?
Or Melinda door.
Where's the Skyway? The Skyway's not hallway. That's that one, okay.
Oh, okay. I can do it, and I'll point on my pen. I'll point it at that. So again, yeah, Skyway entry is here. Service center entry is here. This being the new staircase, and of course, the elevators are a bit further down. This is a very large building, very large floor plate. As I mentioned earlier, speed to delivery here was important, so we did minimize the work we did in order to keep a tight timeline, but our main goal was really to open it up, to make it be a more inviting, open, lit, daylit space. We demolished a number of offices and meeting space here in the, I'm going to call it kind of the center of the space. And for those of you who had been in there pre and post demolition, that was huge. So you get the benefit of the windows on fully two sides of the service center space. It made a huge difference in the space. We also, as a part of this, did do some relamping of the space, so we have a consistent and bright light throughout compared to what it had been. What we wanted to do in the space was really maximize the number of areas and types of spaces that are available for the client meetings, for the resident meetings, knowing that sometimes, we talk about a one-on-one, but sometimes that might be part of an extended family, or often, as you were just saying, involves an interpreter. So we wanted to be able to have those different types of spaces. Maybe it is a family with several children, and how does a parent engage in an interaction with their worker and still be able to keep an eye on their children. So we really wanted to think about all of that.
When you presented this last week, I forgot to bring it up, but in any of those spaces, are there quiet spaces? I guess I just think of, I have a severely autistic son, and how many times I had to come to the county, and he screams endlessly, which causes a complete disturbance. But there's times every year that I have to go physically so the worker can put eyes on him. And are there spaces, are you thinking about a space like that for families while they're sitting and waiting that can be a quiet, less sensory room? Because I'm not the only one. Everyone in disability services has to bring in their person to get eyes on at some point.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Montes-Castillo, and I'll be honest, that's really the first that's come up to me. But what I will say is with our variety of spaces, I think we can accommodate that. And so to that point, and I will come back to that specifically, but I'll just kind of carry on about the space itself. Entering from the hallway into the space, we opened up this lobby from the size it had been when HR was in there. We took out, again, a couple of little rooms that were there to provide that access to daylight. We have a much larger reception area, or counter, I should say, for navigators and or the CSAs to meet folks here, have some discussion here at the counter. This lobby area is immediately adjacent to what will be the public computer area or resource room that will, again, be for the public for PC use, but will also be a place for Workforce Solutions to utilize for their career lab. Expecting between the various staffing, there would always be a staff person in there. Areas for the public to use the computers, phone, again, that multifunction copier, scanner device, and just even if it's fill out forms, et cetera. That area shown in white here is all that generally accessible to the public that's there for the service center. One option that I could see if someone needed that quieter space, we do have a small meeting room right off the main lobby that we've kind of been referring to as a bonus room. We haven't been quite sure what it would be, but in those instances where perhaps some privacy or confidentiality or a quiet room, it could be that purpose. And again, it's still out in what I'll call the public side or the public area of the service center. Then as a resident does meet with their worker, counselor, et cetera, that staff person will be expected to come greet that resident and bring them through the secure door into what we'll call the back area, or truly the inner workings of the service center. Within the service center, I'm going to talk about the different areas you see, the various colors, because they do all have a different purpose. Primarily, we expect that these interactions with residents will occur within workstations, much like they had occurred in the East Building, but in workstations that are configured such that both the staff, the employee, as well as the resident, can easily get in and out of the workstation, feels comfortable in the workstation. They're large enough to be comfortable, but yet close enough and in proximity enough that should something escalate, others would be aware. So kind of balancing the need for a bit of privacy, confidentiality with enough proximity to make sure everybody feels comfortable even in a situation that may escalate. So the orange boxes, boxes that you see on here are those workstations. In fact, you see here there's 25 of them that could, in theory, have 25 different interactions occurring, simultaneous between residents and staff. I'll just say then when a meeting concludes, the staff is expected to escort folks back out to the public part, back out through the lobby. What you also heard is this need to have the interpreters in proximity. And I think what has been a big revelation here in the Service Center 1.0 is just how integral they are to so many of the resident interactions. So the space you see right here, blue, is where we would envision the interpreters are when they're not involved in one of those resident interactions. But then as needed, the interpreters can be brought in to a meeting with a resident here or be asked to come up front to help at the counter with an interaction. So keeping them very central or in proximity, easily accessible, no matter where somebody is within the service center. The various rooms that you see here in, I'll call it purple, kind of a lighter orange, blue up front, are all enclosed meeting rooms of various sizes. It's in the larger rooms that we would see being able to accommodate a family, rather than having some separate room where children maybe are going to be and who's going to watch them. In this service center, at least, we would be intending to set up the furniture in such a way that there could be the toy corner, such that there can be things, hopefully, to entertain children while the conversations are happening by the parent or the guardian in the same room. We don't expect here that there would be any separate childcare or, separation of children from parents or guardians, but accommodating their activities or activity level in one of those larger rooms. You see a couple green enclosed spaces here. They're really being designated for use by supervisors who may be on site for meetings with staff. They may be on site just as a part of the normal day and are available then if some situation needs the attention of the supervisor. But all, again, in very close proximity to all of the other resident meeting areas. We have centrally located, it's in the pink color there, a room which will be used by the sheriff deputies. Much discussion with staff, with residents, with the sheriff's office, with the service center leadership team, and the decision to have the deputies centrally located, but it's an enclosed room. So it's there, but it's not visible, and it is visible, if you want to think about it that way. They will have cameras, visibility to the camera system, really of the building, but particularly the service center, and be able to quickly respond should they need to. All throughout the service center, there will be desk phones, and those desk phones will be set up with an emergency alert button. So if something does escalate or if some staff is getting uncomfortable, they can activate that button and be assured that deputies would respond, but at the same time, not the visual presence that existed in the previous service center in the East Building.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add to this part too, as a finer point, this has been a really challenging piece to the conversation and an important piece, and I appreciate everyone who's been a part of the conversation all the way through. At the East Building, there was a time when you walked in the front door and the first thing you saw was a deputy sitting on high, and by the time we moved our services out of the East Building, the deputies were in the back, but they were still out in front. They have been in the back of the service center space we've been using now as where that's been going on. And I do appreciate that, at least from what I understand from the deputies who have been working in these spaces, I think they're doing their darndest to do a really good job in these spaces. At the same time, we understand how we're balancing the idea of a feeling of being policed the minute you walk in somewhere, with also having the opportunity now to have reviewed multiple safety concerns, some more real than others, to be completely frank as well, that have occurred since we opened. And this is where the plan has landed. I appreciate the team and the thoughtfulness going into it. I do think it begs the question in other buildings of being consistent as we approach how we're going to do security, which over time we can be flexible in that conversation. But part of the challenge coming into this is we view security at Plato very differently than we ever viewed security at the East Building. And that says a lot about a lot of things and who we are as an organization. And that conversation is at the forefront of our minds of, if it's safe here, what does safe look like somewhere else, and who's coming into each space, and how do we manage that? That's going to be an ongoing piece of our work too.
Jim and then Trista.
Maybe to take it even a step farther. You know, I know both the Sheriff's Department and police departments have been utilizing a more casual uniform, so you're not full dress, you know. They use that in the past as kind of a preventive, you know, come out full force right away. That would stop people from misbehaving all. But, you know, maybe, you know, working with the Sheriff's Department, other deputies, if they use casual, the polos, a little bit more casual, so it's not necessarily this hardcore police enforcement presence, but more of this presence here to ensure everybody can feel safe in that environment.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Commissioner McDonough, we had that conversation. We've made that request to the Sheriff's Department to consider for here, and we were not able to move them in their response. So that could be future discussion.
Flat out no, or did they give some?
I would say I got that in a capital N and a capital O.
Well, you know, I think maybe we send a letter from the chair asking that, you know, and get it a little bit more that this matters to us, and you gotta.
And they've been, I want to give them credit for all the ways in which it's been a good conversation. And so even if it came back as no, we take that as one part of a longer dialogue of how we maybe go forward.
I was going to say the same thing, but I was kind of building on what you were saying, Ryan, about how we think about security. I mean, right now with the state of the world, maybe we need to increase security around elections, right? So we think about how we're adjusting, and I'm not suggesting we need to police up by any means. I'm just saying is that I think the consistency across the organization is a better message than policing poor people coming for assistance on a bad day. And also just how we have some consistency. And I know in some places, like in your building, Karen, you have a security guard at the front desk who is a welcoming gentleman and is friendly and whatever.
He's an information officer.
Okay, well, clearly, but he's wearing a security uniform.
Right.
So there's that. But I do think in this case, we have some other security officers in the building as well that don't have a reputation of being a good information officer, but kind of authoritarian and not nice, and I get different job skills. And so it goes back to our customers, our residents. When they see the red R, whether it's contracted or employee, everybody's the same. And so we have to make sure we're also hiring for the right quality and character, even when they are contractors.
Can I thank you, Commissioner, and Mr. Chair, for the question and the comment. I wanted to talk also about, I know we're talking about integrated services so much, but it's so important here because one of the things that we are naturally seeing with the way that they're positioned in the current space, and then what we want to capitalize on in the new space, is they're building relationships with staff. They're eating snacks with them, they're hanging out, they know each other, they're also getting to know the pulse of the environment. And so, yes, while we're not upfront and, at their post, sometimes they are because they're in conversation and they're in community with staff. And to us, what that means is more safety because they know the people and they care about who they work with and they care about the residents coming in too. So yes, we'd like to push on different ways where we can find the gray areas and expand on that, such as the uniform, but we also want to emphasize that we really appreciate their ability to build relationship, which will make everybody safer.
Yeah.
Okay, I have Tony and Victoria.
So this takes us off the safety question, actually, although I very, very much appreciate the conversation that you're having and that it is an ongoing one with our protectors. I want to ask about the reception. And, you have a larger reception area, a larger opportunity for people to be there comfortably. The first interaction is a person. And I'm wondering how planfully you are thinking about the presence of a line or reducing the number of people who have to stand in line in that space. I know that's been a large part of the consideration in the past at the Human Services Building. And I ask that question because I know that there are larger service centers, which we have visited, that have used kiosks, to do a check-in, and that seems to provide an opportunity for people to come in, check in, sit down, and wait to be called upon. even though you're waiting, not standing in line. Help.
Well, I'll answer that, Commissioner. Thank you for the question. So I think you read our mind. We are exploring some like virtual queuing systems. So we currently use a system called No Wait Inside, and we're looking to leverage that system and create virtual lines, like virtual queuing lines. So we're not, so then we're not getting back to where, you know, everybody stands in a line. It is kind of like, I always joke like the airport line when you're at the airport line. So we're not all in a queue in a line. And so that is something we're exploring with our project manager. Again, we already have No Wait Inside that we're using, but we're not using it to its max capacity. And so that is something we're looking to leverage for our Metro 2.0, is that how do we create a queuing system, but it's a virtual queuing system where people can still be in our space, like in the white public space, but not have to physically stand in that line and wait for their turn.
And that would also be used then for phone or computer connection as well, with that same system?
So, Commissioner, so we're not definite on how exactly, right?
Yeah, generally, the principle, yes.
No.
Okay,
But I think what we're noticing is that people are there, so just as you would go to ADC, you're there for different reasons, and so sometimes you walk in, you see people sitting down, you see people in that line, and maybe you don't understand where to go. We're taking into account that, you know, similarly, our residents have complex needs and are there for different reasons, and how do we create understanding of what to do when you even just walk in the door, mixed with comfort and understanding, like, what can you do while you wait, or maybe you want to go check this area out. So we're really pushing our project manager to have capacity on all of these dynamics.
Okay. Victoria, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Victoria.
Okay, so this is not you.
And then you.
This is for, I mean, safety, it doesn't matter if it's here or where it's at. But one of the questions I have is when you, well, actually I'm thinking about the voting right now. Nicole and I were at the in-person service center, environmental service center meeting in Roseville. And I can't remember why I decided to go into the library, or maybe I just took a wrong turn, whatever, because I was in a hurry to get to where I needed to be. But I saw the voting was set up there, but there was no one there. But it was just like open. And I thought, okay, that seems like it's a really bad thing, but I was in too much of a hurry to check into it any further. And maybe there was somebody in the back that was watching over everything. I don't know. But it felt really uncomfortable to me to walk in to see voting and set up for lines, no one there. And I didn't know where the records were or anything. I can't imagine that they move them around.
They do. I've been in for a different meeting, and I saw that, because the voting ends at 4, and I saw them move it to a locked closet in another space.
Okay. Oh, yeah, we saw it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Because we were at River Ranch Family Collaborative when voting shut down for the day last week. So they do move it to a locked space. Yeah.
Okay.
They do move
Never
to a
mind.
locked space.
Thank you, because that totally, it was like, oh my God.
Yeah. But I think they leave the shelf
Right.
up where you can go
And
down. But all the records are locked up, and they had like 2 or 3 people checking off that everything was being moved.
Okay.
So.
Never mind.
Good.
Thanks. So this is impressive, because I've been to the service center or I've looked inside the service centers at Roseville and at Maplewood, I think.
Temporary.
Temporary, right. So are both of those temporary? Is that what they're both? Okay. So we haven't decided to permanently leave those there. And I was just wondering if it was the same kind of deal, same footprint, but we're just sort of experimenting with those ones that are obviously smaller than this because we don't have this kind of footprint. But I was wondering if we're envisioning the same kind of thing at those with the same kind of people and everything.
Commissioner McGuire, Mr. Chair, the last week's documentation had the specific square footage pieces to it in the strategic plan. I would just leave it this takeaway. Same exact concept of how a resident would be served, different sized footprint. When you see the data, you'll understand a little bit of why. And it is going to require us to continue to be smart about how you leverage technology and space. But the idea of the enterprise services role at the point of connection and the property services integration, it's going to be a derivation of the same theme.
And remind me where we're at. Are we they're just temporary there now, we haven't permanently put them there, but like the rest
Those
of the
capital projects have not yet been proposed nor approved by the board. We're starting here. We're trying to
Okay.
finish this building, and then we're gonna move to those. But Maplewood's moving while the Maplewood Library is closed. We're gonna learn some new pieces over the next year.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Jean.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to kind of finish the layout of the space here, you'll note up in this upper right corner, the area shaded in gray is really intended for staff space. I'm going to go out on a limb here with the vision of service centers, and the vision of service centers was that as a worker was going to be meeting with the client, they would be doing so in a workstation or a meeting room, the appropriate space for that particular interaction to occur. And if they then had an hour or two that they weren't meeting with anyone, they would use the staff space. They could go there, workstations, maybe they're catching up on emails, maybe they're sitting doing a training, interacting with their supervisor. Okay, now their next resident-facing meeting occurs, and they, again, are in the appropriate workstation, meeting room for that particular interaction to occur. I will say, day one, we're probably not there. We're still a bit paper intensive. We're still a little bit maybe, locked to our space. Let's just say that we have more people thinking that, don't hold me to this, but these will be used for those specific encounters of one kind, and these for another. And we need to move, as you heard earlier, to here is the resident, and they now need 4 things. Those 4 things now come to them. I don't believe we'll be there day one. That has definitely always been the vision of service centers through the resident first facilities work. And we'll continue to work our way toward that. Again, I do not believe we're going to be there day one. So again, as I talked last week, this service center, the space, the amount of space for resident-facing interactions is really based on the needs put forward that aren't being met in the current service center. And again, that's predominantly around navigators and that door to services, FAS, and workforce solutions. We feel we will be capturing the ability for them to have resident-facing meetings in this space. This by no means is that end-all that we would see as being that would allow us to have the staff and the services for everything that we one day would foresee doing in a service center. That would be Downtown Service Center 3.0, probably, but it moves us in that direction. And I can say that we do have other of the services, specifically social services, child support, veterans, I know of, Melinda may know of others, that do want to begin to use this space for their resident interactions, as opposed to the varied locations that they use today. So it's all moving in that right direction.
Excuse me, Jean. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Gene, for that. And I really appreciate, your straightforwardness and your communication to us about the vision and where you want to be, but where you're at, because that's really helpful. But it also kind of begs the couple of questions that came to my mind is, I know at one time, and I would imagine we still have her, we actually had an individual that her job title was change management, right? She was with the county. I actually met with her to talk about that, but how are we prepping our employees so they really understand the vision and understand their role and their level of cooperation to actually achieve that vision for the same people that we're, trying to support and they're working with and trying to support? What is kind of that piece of it? How are we prepping them?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Ortega, I'll get there someday. The team, the leadership team that was mentioned at the outset earlier, the collaborative leadership team there of departments is where they, quite frankly, you need to fight some of that stuff out quietly in that space and leave with a unified vision then that moves back into department level. And until departments buy in enough there, it's just never going to take hold. And that table, that's an intentional reason why that table exists, is they have to also be allowed to have some space to sometimes disagree with what's easy to make at a vision level, and then you got to talk implementation, right? So I think we have the structure there as the right level to begin that piece. I believe that if we can get buy-in at that table, it moves from there. And I'm not saying we can't get buy-in, just that group's just standing up now, right? And the focus has been on getting the space right to enable those types of things. Otherwise, you're fighting about something where there's no space to let it happen anyway. The one other point I just want to add to Jean's piece is if we ultimately do need more space, if you were to go to the right blank piece here, there's space to go further over. So we can expand in the future if we want. Yeah, and that's been something that they prepped me on months ago. And so, but the reason I'm not sold that you need to, as this building by the end of next year houses social services within it as we move out of the east building and get these other spaces, who's to say these spaces right here don't call people from other floors in to come down here for an hour and a half? Like, it's hard for me to envision whether you do or don't need more space until we're actually in this building together as a unified organization first.
This is a follow-up, so they over there, I mean, in comparison, is it twice as much as you have, or up there, or a quarter, or how much more is there?
The adjacent space and literally to the end of the building has historically been all IS space.
Oh.
If we were to displace IS entirely, you'd double this space.
Okay.
We can show you when we walk by. That'll give you a sense.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I did want to address the piece about organizational change management. We do still, that is still a very important discipline that we in Residents First and the TGC, whenever we provide funding for project management or program management, we require the proposals to have organizational change management as a piece of that. So it's still a discipline that is a big piece of the work that we do. We don't have per se right now, as we're continuing to build out the project management office, we don't have an organizational change manager that we did before Christina Ralston, who met with you. But we do require that all of the proposed work that comes before us has that built into it. And we do work to get organizational change management as part of those that work.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. I think that's important. But kind of going back to skill sets, right? I mean, that's a really important skill set, that change management piece. You know, in some cases, we're asking people that, you know, have kind of built this. Now tell me how you're going to manage change to go to here, where they still might have some ownership about what they built, right? And so it's about the skill. That's a huge skill set, that how to manage that change. But I appreciate that you're intentional about it. You're calling it out. You're getting your leaders and your people understanding that that's a key part of this, and they got a responsibility to it.
No, I go back to Jean's very first comment, which resonated with me. Past the training, past everything else, it just takes time. It will take time. I don't care who you hire. It will take time. And we'll get there.
Could we try and go in about 15 minutes here to go through the data pieces as well, so we get some time to walk through before we lose our entire afternoon?
Yep. The only other thing I'll say for the tour, I mean, obviously you can linger, but otherwise, if we go through the front, head back toward the windows, the interpreter area, make a loop around and out. If you want to linger, that's good and fine, but that would give you a good, you know, look through the space. The construction per se is done. We do have some punch list items, so you might see something that needs to be touched up. The furniture, the workstation furniture is in place. We still have furniture and hopefully some artwork to install, particularly conference rooms, et cetera. So it's not done, which is why it doesn't officially open for a couple weeks, but thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, Commissioner, County Manager, Directors, and Partners, the next couple of slides will talk about some of the data that we've been collecting in the service center. So I have a short amount of time, so we'll probably go through it fairly quickly, and if there's questions, feel free, you can reach out to myself or Melinda, and we can go through those, in more detail. So in our service center, we are always looking for an opportunity to move from enterprise services to staff tracking and to do reflection on interactions with a collective approach. So right now what we're doing is we're just collecting data based off of the tracking of our staff. We understand and we know there's a need to understand the impact and outcome of our integrated services versus the number of residents that we serve in our service centers. What we also like to look at is connecting to county-wide collaborative efforts, such as the resident relationship management, the RRM, providing holistic view of the residents and helping create an environment where residents can have a unified experience when they come into our service center seeking for services. We also want to look at the resident experience design, like the capability in being intentional and proactive and systematically defining, design, and measure how the county engages with residents so then it's a meaningful experience for them when they come into the service center. Okay. So the next couple of slides will look at resident data that we capture from January of 2022 to August of 2022. We'll also look at service center interaction by site, and that's kind of reference to what Ryan was talking earlier about the interaction per site. You'll see why the square footage is substantially different between our three service center sites. We'll also look at average monthly and daily interaction at Metro Square, and then also interaction by language. So how we track our interaction is that we use a tool called Microsoft Forms tool. It's not very advanced, but it is the current technology that's available to our team. All the interactions are tracked by either a navigator, a customer service support assistant, or sometimes a supervisor if they're out in the lobby and they're helping with residents. All of the data you'll see, it's not self-reported by residents, so you will not see any demographics in our data that we'll be presenting today. I also want to caution you with a disclaimer that the data that we're going to share, it is not an accurate reflection of the number of residents that we serve. So sometimes it's very difficult to track every single interaction you have with the resident. So for instance, if I am the navigator, I'm helping with the resident, there's 5 people like in line in queue waiting, tracking doesn't become your first priority. And your first priority is helping the resident. So sometimes we forget to track or it doesn't become the priority. So you'll see some of the numbers, but it's not a true reflection of all of the interaction that we have. Last disclaimer is that the data that you'll see, it's just tracking from enterprise services staff. So our partners, Workforce Solution, FAS, they have their own tracking, and it's not reflected in the data that we'll see here. So our first slide is service center interaction by site. So you'll see that 58%, the bulk of the interaction, happen all at our downtown service center at Metro Square. Followed next by Maplewood, Roseville, and then our community partner sites. So I just want to kind of talk about community partner sites first. So community partner sites are sites where our navigators go out, they spend a day at different community partner sites, providing services, and then also providing connection for residents to county services. Some of the community sites that we're at, just an example, we're at Bruce Bent Elementary School, John A. Johnson Elementary School, Danes Bluff Community Rec Center, the Mental Health Center, St. Paul Opportunity Center, Open Cities Health Center, and George Latimer Library. So those are just some examples of the different community partner sites that we're at. This next slide shows our average monthly interaction at Metro Square. So on an average, we see about 856 residents that we track for interaction. You can see from the data that the bulk of the residents that come into Metro Square, the need is for financial assistance services at 63%, then followed by resident general needs. Resident general needs, I'll explain a little bit about that. So if a resident comes in and they need assistance with a shelter referral, helping find resources for a food shelf, administrative needs such as like helping them make copies, printing. Another big aspect of what we do with resident general needs is our community career lab, and then also the public computer. So we have a lot of residents that need, they don't have access to internet or they do not have computers, so they can come into the research room and then use the computer. So that's where you'll see the second most need interaction in the Metro Square Service Center is the general residence need, and then just followed by kind of split between the other different areas. Okay, the next slide talks about our daily Metro Square interaction. So daily, on an average.
Mr. Chair, remind me, what is the timeline on this, the data that we're seeing?
January to August of 2022, so during that 8-month period.
Okay, and it's been fully operational that whole time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is our daily interaction at Metro Square. We average about 45, and again, we're substantially under tracking. I can guarantee you we see more residents than 45 residents a day at Metro Square. Of the 45 that we've tracked, 57% is for financial assistance needs, and then 27% for general assistance. Financial assistance service is some of the questions or some of the services that we provide at the service center are examples like a benefit printout. Residents coming in, they need a benefit printout. They, can't get a hold of a financial worker. They need to talk to somebody about their case. They may need help with setting up an interview for an application. Case status questions is a huge question that we get, and also assistance with filling out an application. So the applications are quite cumbersome and complicated, so a lot of residents come in and we help them with that application.
And Mr. Chair, and again, so because Workforce Solutions has their own tracking, that's not included here?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so this next slide talks about Metro Square interaction by month. So on an average, a month, there's about 6,848 total interactions at Metro Square. Sorry, that was Ryan telling me I got to speed it by 5 minutes. Right on cue. That was like, you got 5 minutes now. So Metro Square interaction by month. So you can see there's a fluctuation in months from January going to August. So, some explanations. In March and April, we were heavily involved in Rent Help MN, and so we saw a huge influx of residents coming into the service center for assistance with applications, checking on their Rent Help MN. We also had to assist residents with applying online too. So you can see that in March and April, when funding was available, that's where we had the huge influx and increase of residents come into the service center. In May, I can't tell you for sure why there was such a dip. Part of it, I think, is, again, we're under tracking. Also in May, we were substantially understaffed, so we lost a couple of staff. We were in the midst of hiring. The good news is, going into June, we hired 5 additional navigators, so that brought us up to a full FTE of staff. But you can see from the chart that in each month, with a different interaction, what was the highest need, the bulk of the interaction, which is a reflection of the previous 2 slides. So this last slide talks about the interaction by language. So in this slide, it reflects that the bulk of the interaction is in English, with next Korean and Somali, and then Ormo, Spanish, and others follow by behind. So there's a little bit of difference in this graph and how we capture this data. So for example, if I am a navigator and I am working with a resident, and it is something that was in my scope as a navigator, and they need an interpreter, I would request the assistance of our in-house interpreter, and then I would track the interaction. If the interaction is where a resident has a need with financial assistance services, along with an interpreter, when I make that soft handoff to financial assistance, we don't track the interaction. So we're really only tracking the interactions that we facilitate, and then we work with the residents. So when we do the soft data, we don't track that because then our partner departments are tracking them. So we don't double track. So it seems like there's not a high need for language, but I can assure you there's a huge need. You know, a lot of our residents come in and there's a need for languages.
So a lot of times, especially with families, they'll rely on, you know, one of their children, right? I mean, that's pretty common. We're not tracking that then to really get an understanding of how many times they're just, we're not actually providing the interpretation, because ideally we don't want to rely on the kid to do that. But that happens so often, and I don't know how much, maybe that's not happening here at all, but are we tracking that if it is happening?
Yes, we are tracking that. So if the interactions with the navigator or a CSA, you know, or a service center supervisor, then we are tracking that too. Yeah, and it does, I mean, it happens, but we've seen it, you know, in our service center happen less and less. You know, I think a lot of people are familiar that we have in-house interpreters. We access the language line. Our team, I think we were really fortunate. Our team is quite diverse. So we have, you know, several people, several navigators and CSA on our team that speaks multiple languages. So I think that we're seeing less and less of residents having to rely on family members or children to help interpret.
Thank you.
Similar to building data, though, you can see how all the data here has existed here, and now we've established where the hub for a lot of this can exist, but over the next couple of years, we really have to do a lot to get it up to the balcony.
Before we leave, this data collection, we're doing this via, how are you collecting the data?
So there's a Microsoft form, and so we created a tracking mechanism on Microsoft form. So navigators and CSAs, they open up that form, and then you go in and you track the interaction until you know, it's just like a checkbox you pick. Yep, and then you hit submit. So that's how we're tracking our interactions.
Ryan, it seems to me that down the road, we need to integrate, if we're integrating the services.
Yep.
We still have the data in silos.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what actually I was getting at, Mr. Chair. We agree on this, that as the services integrate, we have to integrate the data as well. And so you're going to see a totally different picture in the next couple of years. You're totally right. No, I think that's okay. Are you going down ahead of us, or are you taking us now?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm ready. Picked up on the cue.
Good work, thank you. Good work.
I think we're adjourned.